It was the best of trips, it was the worst of trips, except it wasn't the best of trips at all. Hi, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is The Right Angle on President Obama's bogus journey to the G20 summit in Hangzhou, China, made possible by the paying members of BillWhittle.com. All right, Obama's trip to the Heavenly Kingdom began with a stairway to, well, nowhere. The most powerful man in the world, and in my script those words are in scare quotes, he had to cool his heels, trapped on Air Force One because for whatever reason, nobody rolled the staircase up to the front of the president's personal 747. Finally, the president had to leave out the back of the plane, seemingly, pooped out of his own jet, instead of making the traditional grand entrance, which was made by every other G20 leader, including Russian Premier Vladimir Putin, and even the president of Indonesia, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Joko Widodo. Obama tried to brush it off as no big deal. The Chinese blame poor prep work on the part of the White House advance team. Bill, speaking as someone who's done a little bit on pardon me, I think I've got Hillary Clinton's disease, who's spoken about the importance of visuals to this administration. It's a long drop from the famous O icon down to the Chinese tarmac, isn't it?
It sure is, and it reminds me of that old saying that says that an English gentleman is never rude except on purpose. I think that's exactly what we're dealing with here. I find it hard to believe that the Chinese made this kind of mistake. There was some talk, I think we talked yesterday on the conference call, saying that the Secret Service wanted to get involved, and that was part of the problem, but I don't think it was an accident. There's so much of diplomacy are things like this. They're little sensors, they're pressure tests to see attitude. They're trying to see resiliency. When the Russians fly airplanes off our coast, 6 inches off our coast, we go up there and scramble fighters to get up there because they're provoking us, we're responding, and we both have a better idea of where each other's coming from. But, given the fact that this is the 8th year of smart diplomacy, I just like to say, back when George Bush was president, they hated us and laugh behind our backs. Now they hate us and laugh right to our faces. You cannot put any kind of measure on the damage that this president has done to the stature. Forget the alliances. Forget all the actual diplomatic moves. Just to the stature, the grandeur even of the United States of America and the presidency as well. So I don't think this was an accident, and I don't think it was a mistake.
Bill, do you think the Chinese were trying to do anything in particular here, or was it just to tweak our tail while they still can?
Well, I think it's probably that. Look, there's always the chance that it was, in fact, an accident. But, these are pretty well-prepared people, the Chinese. It's very hard to imagine that even if it was an accident, that it would take so long to get it fixed that they had to go out the back door, basically. So, part of this is he's a lame duck president. They probably want to get the reactions of the candidates, if any. Maybe they just want to take a swipe at him. Again, the whole thing could be an accident, but it doesn't seem likely, Steve, because the one thing, as I said, that has happened so catastrophically is we've lost. We used to be liked and respected. Then we were respected. Now we're just neither of those two things.
Well, let me give you just one more follow-up, because this just occurred to me. If the Chinese are trying to make us look bad, or our country look bad, are we playing into that by talking this up? Or as patriots before partisans, should we just kind of help sweep this under the rug?
I've never felt that patriotism meant being quiet about things that were true.
All right.
If we were talking about national security secrets or things that could affect the military posture of the United States, needless to say, that's something I would just keep under my hat till I died. But when we're talking about a political move like this, I think it needs to be discussed. The one thing that I think really bears some consideration here is this. Is that in many ways, and probably the most important ways, Air Force One is America overseas. In fact, it's more America than the president is, because the presidents come and go, but Air Force One remains the same. It is the most iconic aircraft in the world, and when Air Force One lands on your runway, you are now at the dance. You're being visited by supposedly the most powerful man in the world. So keeping him cooped up in Air Force One is a double insult. It's not just an insult to Obama, it's an insult to America that the most famous jet and the most famous arrival, we don't talk about Russia One, we don't talk about China One, we don't talk about Great Britain One. We have an airplane that announces that the President of the United States and therefore the presence of the United States is in your country. And the idea that they would have to simply not provide, they're just not providing, ramp service. I just don't know what to say about it. I really don't.
Yeah, red face again. I'm getting used to it after almost 8 years.
Yeah, me too.
All right, after the G20 summit was over, Obama jetted off for a historic visit to Laos, but the most historic thing about the trip might have been when Obama called off a planned meeting with Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte after he called Obama, and this is a quote, a son of a whore. The insult came after Obama promised publicly to dress down the Philippine president for his violent crackdown on the drug trade, which has 2,400 people dead so far, which is bad enough. But once again, Obama shrugged it off, calling Duterte a colorful guy. But Scott, aren't diplomatic visits usually conducted with a little more diplomacy?
Well, first of all, the trip to Laos, leaving China headed for Laos, got a little bit delayed because President Obama had to stand at the baggage retrieval carousel for a long time, just waiting for that thing to come around, even before he got into the country. And then on the way out, there was a mix-up with his carry-on and everything.
Long security line, all that stuff.
That's right. And then he got the extra, full, generous cavity search as he was going through their equivalent of the TSA. It's interesting because in both of these circumstances, we see evidence of countries who are saying basically, this is our country, we are sovereigns here, we determine what goes on, and we will not be pushed around by the United States of America. Now, it used to be, under more gracious leadership, that the United States of America didn't have to push people around, especially people who were considered either non-combatants, non-enemies, or allies, because there was a mutual sense of respect. But, the shouting match that happened on the tarmac in China, Hangzhou, I think is where they were, that shouting match between a top Chinese official and some Obama cabinet member, the guy was shouting, "This is our airport. You don't tell us what to do at our airport." And the president of the Philippines, what he was saying, and he was nice enough to put the slur in Tagalog. He was speaking in English, and then he switched over to Tagalog, the native language there, and did the son of a whore thing in that language. But he was basically saying, don't you tell me what to do, you leader of the free world. This is sovereign Philippine territory, and we will have our way. Now, since then, he has apologized somewhat and basically said that his, was a poor choice of words, but that he reasserted Philippine sovereignty. And I think this all flows from early on in the Obama presidency, where he basically couldn't say unequivocally that America is exceptional, that we're exceptional just like the Greeks think they're exceptional, just like the Chinese and the Filipinos think that they're exceptional. And he just basically told everybody in the world, it's okay to treat us as if we're just some run-of-the-mill country that you don't have to pay any special deference to. And frankly, we won't pay any special deference to you either.
Well, Steve, I just got to jump in on this, because I think it's much deeper than that. It's the reason people are this rude to Obama is because they know that after 8 years, the President of the United States is going to come to their country in order to lecture them. He knew he was going to lecture the Philippines. He was coming to lecture them. The British are basically saying, he went to Great Britain again recently and basically said, you guys made the wrong decision. And they're saying, who the hell is this guy? This is what happens when you elect a narcissist. You could have very serious problems with the Philippines, as we did when we decided to withdraw our bases there. But it wasn't personal. And it wasn't personal because the President of the United States, throughout history, basically, has behaved in a presidential way. This guy, at the beginning of his term, said, oh, we don't need to worry about anything. We've got me.
Scott, Bill brought something up that I wanted to get your take on. The president, again, while in China for this G20 summit with, supposedly all of our big friends there and some rivals, but all the big important economies of the world, he again reiterated that he thought our British friends voted wrong on leaving the EU. What do you think our British friends think about our last two presidential elections?
Well, and yeah, and his constant insertion of himself into things that are none of his business, whether that is into the Brexit vote or into what happens with the police force in Massachusetts. He has an opinion about everything, and Bill's right. This narcissism that says basically, not only do I have an opinion about everything, but the world needs to hear my opinion. Shows him to be, far from smart diplomacy. It's like the worst kind of diplomacy.
It is.
I mean, it's just take grandma's advice. I mean, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. There was no reason. And it's funny because I'm one of those who is critical of Donald Trump for shooting his mouth off and for insulting world leaders and for insulting fellow Republicans and doing all that kind of stuff on a regular basis just to take the pot shot. Not necessarily because there's an open conflict, but he just wants to bring up the fact that some guy's a loser. Well, he's just following in the footsteps of President number 44.
Yeah.
Isn't it ironic, by the way, that that Mr. Multiculture, Mr. Grew Up Overseas, Mr. Foreign Sensitivity, Mr. Everything, going to heal the world? Isn't it interesting that he is behaving like the stereotypical white bad American? You know, like he's the what's the word they use? Is not the nasty
The ugly
American.
American.
The ugly American. He's the ugly American tourist who comes into a hotel, tells people how to run the hotel, demands the best seat, then leaves when he doesn't like the food, and it's embarrassing.
Well, and think about this. He's doing this stuff because we have evidence that behind the scenes he's a powder puff, but he is doing this stuff very openly. Like, remember him patting, who was it, Sergei Lavrov or Dmitry Medvedev, patting him on the knee and saying, "Hey, don't worry, after the election things will be different here." And Medvedev says, "Yes, I will tell Vladimir." I mean, behind the scenes he's a pussycat, but he wants to project this kind of I'm the strong guy who tells everybody what to do, when in reality everybody from Bashar Assad to Rodrigo Duterte says, we know what kind of a fighter you are.
Yeah, he's the kind of guy that kisses the boss's butt, but is mean to waiters, you know?
Yeah, he's got to be the bride at every funeral and the corpse at every wedding, this guy. Listen, folks, I had this big wrap-up written for you, and then Bill and Scott just stole all of my great points as I let him go on way too long, but that was my choice to let him do that. So let me just finish up by saying one last thing. A little advice for our president as he enjoys his last few months in office. Sir, don't go overseas to play stompy foot when you're wearing clown shoes, all right? You make us all look a lot better. And that is the right angle on the president's horrible, terrible, no good, very bad trip overseas. Brought to you by the paying members of BillWhittle.com. Thanks to them for making this possible. Thanks to you for your time. We'll see you again.